Welcome to the Redcaps Podcast, a podcast where we dip our caps into the blood of our listeners and we ramble on a bit old school games. In today's episode, we're going to have a very special... Wait a minute. What's that? Guys, that's not my theme song.
Where you didn't know you wanted to go. Fantasy and dungeon delve, science fiction. Watch yourselves.
That's right, folks. Today on the Redcaps Podcast, we are joined by Ray Otus from the Plundergrounds podcast. Remember, no mortal can outrun Redcap, so I hope you can sit back, listen, and enjoy. Today's episode is going to be a little bit of a long one. It's on no particular topic, although a lot of really important topics do get discussed, so I hope you're able to listen through the entire conversation between Ray and I. And yeah, we just sit and we talk about gaming, we talk about some mental health stuff, we talk about all the cool things that Ray does. If you're not familiar with him, you should definitely be listening to the Plundergrounds podcast or visiting the Plundergrounds blog or the Viridian Scrolls blog. All the links to all of Ray's stuff will be down in the description. But yeah, it's a long chat, but it's a really good one, so I hope you enjoy. And with that, let's listen in on the conversation. All right, I'm joined by a tabletop roleplay gamer, an artist, a writer, a designer. He'll take you where you didn't know you wanted to go. Ray Otus, welcome to the show, sir. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Yeah, good to be on.
Yeah, thanks for joining onto the show. I listen to yours all the time, so it's a little bit weird having, like, I can have real feedback with you rather than just listen to you talk and like talk to myself and go, oh, yeah, I need to record that instead of do them as a message. So it'll be kind of nice to be able to, when I hear you say something, actually be able to respond to you right away and not have to do a call in.
Right, we'll get the sausage being made live here.
So I know you best from Plundergrounds and a couple other things that you've done. But the Plundergrounds I know of is the podcast. I didn't know about the zine until much later after I started listening to the podcast. So
right.
Can you tell us a little bit about how the podcast came about and what the zine's all about? And the other thing I'll tee up before it gets there so I don't forget, will the zine come back? Okay. It's been quiet for a while on that front.
Yeah. Right. So let's get into all that. I was interested in I'm going to kind of start with the podcasting because I have these my interests are very circular. And so it's hard for me. I'm not a very consistent person. So my form of consistency is that I'll get really into something for a while, then I'll kind of leave it behind, but I always get back to it eventually. Right. And I actually was way into podcasts when they very first started. I did a segment on another show called Midnight's Lair that was kind of regular at the time. It's been ages ago. This is back about Sons of Cryos age, like one of the early Sons of Cryos and Have Games Will Travel and some of the early ones. So I kind of liked podcasting, but never really did my own. And then I've always liked the idea. I need to create. It's just the way I keep my brain from eating itself, which it does anyway sometimes. But so I just basically pour my energy into one thing after another. So whether I sink it into a heavy period of reading or blogging or drawing or, whatever it is I'm doing, I have to be doing something. This was, I guess, it's a couple of years after that. After I moved to California, even it's probably around 2009, 2010, maybe. Was it that long ago? Gosh, I really was. I was really into Dungeon World at the time, which is a game I didn't want to like and still don't want to like sometimes. Which is, I don't know if I can or should unpack that. But it is so smooth at the table and it's fun to make things for. And I had all these ideas that I'd been writing down. I think what happened was there's a guy named Marshall Miller. He wrote The Warren, which is the role-playing game that's kind of analog to Watership Down. And he can't say that, but I can. And he had come up with this format called the Dungeon Starter, which was kind of a one-page way of getting down an adventure idea, almost like the GM's notes, and included impressions, which are just bullet points of things that you might sensory details that you might give a player. And it's got questions that you would ask that are kind of leading questions because, one of the principles of Dungeon World is ask your characters questions and use their answers. Right. And so this kind of format had a couple different things to it. And I liked the format and I started making a few of those. And I thought each one of these is detailed enough. I should make it into a zine. And so I got into this habit of every other month releasing a zine for a while. I did it for about 1.5 years, 2 years, I guess. And I did some episodes that I'm really proud, some issues that I'm really proud of. The idea of them. I think the mechanics are good too, but now not as many people play Dungeon World, and it's not as popular. It's been abandoned by its authors, which is kind of partially why. And I keep thinking I should redo them. They really don't need much. I just need to retool them for like old school essentials or Troika or whatever it is I choose, or maybe just a system that I think what I'd choose is a system that's open enough that I could embed it in the book. And so the system could travel with the book, and you could use probably something, old school compatible. So yeah, I did those zines. I did some of the illustrations myself. I ran it through Patreon and collected money, but all the money I got, I turned over into artists. So I worked with some really cool people. I worked with Evelyn Moreau, and I worked with, oh gosh, the names are going to escape me. Sean Poppy and Carl Sternberg and Juan Ochoa. That's who I was trying to think of. A guy from Colombia that I used a lot, and they were great. And it was fun to be able to commission art and pay artists. Made me feel very special.
You're all professional and a big kid now.
Well, I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and I actually have a doctorate in English Comp and Rhetoric. And I've always like the creative world, but in my square life, I run a software company. So I don't get to do as much of that kind of art direction and creativity as I always want to do. But I will say this, the zine, while I got into a rhythm, it was a tremendous time sink, and in a way that I love, but also not really sustainable. So eventually it started slowing down, and then I just decided to end it and move on to some other things. So that's where the Plundergrounds, and in fact, the name Plundergrounds came from a guy that I knew on Google Plus back in the day, Guillaume Genty. He's a Frenchman. He designs puppets actually, and is for community theater and does cool community theater stuff. And so he came up with that name. I can't take credit for it, but I love it, and I've used it kind of as a brand for just my stuff in general ever since, really.
Yeah, it's a great name. That's it's kind of hard to forget. It rolls off the tongue. So yeah, I dig that. I like the idea of embedding a system in with the magazine if you're going to redo it, like maybe something like Maze Rats or Knave or something along those lines, like a small rules light one that I think Maze Rats they let you is Creative Commons, but there's got to be a few different Creative Commons games out there that you could take and be able to do something like that. The other area that I know you from, which when I first started listening to you, I don't think I realized that you were the same person across both, but was Gygax 75.
Oh yeah,
and so I think everybody and their dog at some point over the last several years has attempted the Gygax 75 challenge. How many times have you done, or how many of these have you read and gone through? Because I'm sure there's got to be tons of people that after they complete them, send them your way or ask you your opinion on it.
I get to see them a lot in progress. I don't see the finished ones a lot. I've gone through it 4 times myself. I have revised it. I even have a revision sitting on my hard drive right now that uses, instead of public domain art, it actually uses art from various people's projects. I was on the server that Yochai, a Discord server that Yochai Gal, who now has a podcast, Between Two Carns, but he wrote the Cairn rule system. And where was I going with that? I almost completely lost my train of thought. I was on a Discord server that he ran, and a bunch of them kicked off the challenge. And so I said, "Oh, I'll jump in and do it with you." And I ended up doing kind of a weird, something inspired by H.G. Wells' First Men in the Moon. So and I was going to use Into the Odd as my base system. And so I went through it with them and collected a lot of examples. It's fun to watch people go through that. Now, the Gygax challenge is another one of those things where kind of a zeitgeist. I mean, a lot of people were kind of thinking about this at the same time. I ran across that article on another blog. I'm the one that turned it into a kind of a workbook. I didn't realize it was very popular. Honestly, I just threw it out there on itch.io and forget to watch it, And then I think Ben Milton covered it, and some other people kind of started telling me that it's kind of all over the place. I'm like, oh, great. I mean, I'm always a little nervous about having stuff out there. Like I have the creator destroyer mentality, right? Like I love to create things and I'm proud of what I create, but at the same time, they're never good enough for me. I always want to go back and fix them, quote unquote, fix them.
Yeah. Perfect is the enemy of good. And you sometimes have to let it live. Right.
Yep.
The other place that people might have found you is the Viridian Scroll, which is another name I want to ask Viridian Scroll from. So it sounds like it's something I should know, but I don't know where that comes from. And you've got some pretty cool projects on there.
So the Viridian Scroll, it's cool that you say that because the name just something I made up. In fact, there's a book that I love, and if you people have never read it, I would suggest it. It's I really like these old, super short science fiction and fantasy books from like the 60s and 70s. That's kind of my sweet spot. The ones that, not the big honking, fantasies that are 400 pages for the first book in a series of 9 or whatever, that started really in the 80s. But the stuff before that, the sword and sorcery things, are a little more manageable. There's a guy named M. John Harrison, and he wrote The Pastel City. You mostly find it now in a collection called Viraconium. And The Pastel City is the first book in that, and he wrote some other books in the series. But the first book I found at a friend's house when I was staying overnight when I was like in junior high, right? And it had this awesome cover that was all in blues and greens, like kind of high, almost like oil pastel, like really vivid blues and greens, right? And it just had this certain feel to it. It's like if you could imagine the kind of patina that you get on copper, right?
Okay, yeah.
And for some reason, the way he described the main character there, who's called Tegius Chromis, it's a funny kind of sci-fi fantasy post-apocalyptic Thundar the Barbarian, kind of story. So it's pretty cool. And it has a lot of neat stuff in it. Like it's got a dwarf that has a big exoskeleton, a dwarf called Tomb of all things. And he's got a big metal exoskeleton, and it's got these basically lightsabers before Star Wars. It's got some other stuff in it that's kind of cool. It sounds very science fiction, but it's not that. It's really more fantasy. Any rate, there's something about that color and the kind of, I don't know if the word Viridian was in there or where I ran across the word Viridian, but it's a word you don't hear much. And it's a color word, but it also sounds like kind of metallic to me. And so I wanted to use that word, and I came up with something where I could get the URL and that kind of stuff. Right. So yeah, I don't know. The Viridian Scroll. Just something I made up.
Oh, I like it. Like I said, whenever I read it, I was like, I feel like I'm missing a reference because that sounds like something I should know. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like the sound of it
from a Jack Vance book or something, right?
Yeah. And if folks go and look at the Viridian Scroll, especially now, they're going to see a couple of really cool projects that you've got going on. The Project Gray Skull of the DM screen, taking the old He-Man Gray Skull. What's the word I'm looking for? Toy set, I guess would be the best way to describe it, and putting it into a GM screen. It looks like you've got the dice roller and everything all figured out in it and stuff like that.
I like to craft stuff. And you're gonna get there's gonna be I'm an inveterate thief, right? So there's a theme here of, what is it called? Genius. What is it? Like smart people borrow and geniuses steal or something like that. There's some phrase like that. Well, so the reason I say that is because a couple of years ago, maybe Gary Con 9, was my first Gary Con, and I went there, and Reed Sanfilippo, who wrote America is with a U, America, kind of a post-apocalyptic setting for DCC before Mutant Call Classics came out. He had a Castle Grayskull there. And now these are, for people who aren't familiar, they used to make these for different toy lines. They were basically big plastic suitcases with a hinge, and you open them up, and inside there's shelves where you can put your action figures and things like that. So you can play kind of inside of it and outside of it, but it also served as a carrying case. So there's usually a handle built into the top. And he had made kind of a GM screen out of it. And I thought, that's cool. So my friend Paul, who's there with me, he was a big He-Man fan. He-Man was a little after my sort of I'm more of a Thundar, Black Star, Flash Gordon, Johnny Quest, that all those, right?
Right.
And but he said he had an old one, and I was like, oh man, I'd love to do something with that. So I got it, and I started crafting I made a dice tower inside out of a PVC pipe and a bend, like one of those gooseneck bendy like pipes, so that it will rattle the dice around, and it comes out the gate of the mouth. I put lights in it. I've drilled out I repainted it first, which was, I had to do that because it's just like the original paint job. It's like wherever it was done overseas, they start out with green plastic, and then they just hosed it with bright green, and then a couple stripes of black spray paint that are kind of indiscriminate, and it was done. So I repainted it. Been having a lot of fun. I put shelves in it. I have been playing around with different ways to pack it. I'm not really much of a GM screen guy, but what I want is to make it into kind of my, like a go kit. And I've been working a lot on it lately because of what I'm loading it with. I bought some wooden blocks the other day to use for terrain for the table. Yeah. Because while specific terrain is really cool, you can't carry every possible piece of terrain you're ever going to need, and sometimes wooden blocks are better, right?
Yeah, get some Jenga blocks and set them up, and there's your walls and everything else.
So I got some wooden blocks in there. I've got some different things that I'm loading it with, and I've got a whole plan that I'm working towards March for the next GaryCon. I bought some plastic toys that are from the Dragon Riders of the Styx line, which was an 80s and they had little lava men and like these winged demons and stuff. And so I'm trying to do a game that is kind of Sword and Planet, has none of the monsters that you sort of already know from Edo fantasy, right, and use only plastic toys and like really tactile things. I'm thinking when I get there, I might even buy like little boxes of breakfast cereal for people to eat at the table while they're playing, right? Some Fruit Loops and stuff. So I've been doing that. I had a shadow box that my wife had sort of discarded, didn't know what to do with. And I said, I'll take that, right? So I cut some pieces out of that. This is unrelated, another project that I'm getting ready to put up on the Viridian Scroll. And I turned it into like a dungeon diorama from some old heritage miniatures that I've been painting, and laid in some dungeon stonework and stuff behind it. I made I don't know if I ever showed you guys this or not. I've got a dice tower design that you can make out of a pizza box. And I keep thinking I'll put it out there, but I haven't. It's kind of perfected in my mind, but I want to make an instructional video on how to put, like how to do it. So I haven't put it out there yet, but I'd make them for my friends just because, for fun. So I've got all these little, I like doing stuff like that. It keeps me sane. Right.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And I put those on Viridian Scroll. Yeah.
Yeah, I've not seen the pizza box one, but yeah, you should definitely post that one up. I have seen the shadow box. That looks really cool. So that's really neat. Another one of the ones that you have up there that I really like, I call it your Pop-O-Matic Oracle. I forget, is that the name you use, or you used the little things that you get the coin toy?
I call them acorns. I think that's what they're called, acorns. They're so when you go used to be everywhere, less common now, but still, if you're walking out of a box store like a Target or Walmart, especially, they'll have those. You stick in a quarter and you crank the mechanism, and out comes a little plastic bubble with a toy in it, right?
Right.
And those I think are called acorns, and you can buy them on Amazon. But I buy small dice and I put them in the acorn. And then that's one of my go dice, the ones that I keep with me all the time are in that little, and you can shake them then. And they're great. I was playing Fighting Fantasy Book on a plane about a month ago using those, right? Because you don't have to worry about them falling on the floor or going everywhere or whatever.
Yeah, I was browsing around on a dice site the other day because I like weird dice. Not so much not like DCC odd dice, but I'll show you here on the camera. But I've got a huge collection of 12-sided D6s and 8-sided D4s and stuff like that. I like those kinds of dice. So I was browsing around on a website the other day, and this company it was a large plastic see-through D6. It had all the pips of the D6 on the outside, but on the inside, they had other D6s inside there. So you could roll the one big plastic D6, get a result, and then you'd have smaller ones on the inside, which I thought was kind of cool. When I saw that, I thought of your website right there.
Yeah, my favorite pocket dice are a D20 and like 2D6s, but you can do a lot with 2D6 of one color and a D6 of another color.
Yep.
You just find that because that rolls, you can roll all three at once, but you can get a 1D6 roll, a 2D6 roll, 3D6 roll. Like, you know what I mean? It's pretty neat that way. And you can even do like if you were doing roll 4, drop the highest, you could roll all three and then do it again and just use the 1 die roll on the second one as your 4th die. I mean, it's a very usable construct, and that's what I tend to put in those little acorns. But, yeah.
Right. And you do a lot of artwork. You've got your, what is it you're calling it, the monster? It was like
that's
creature club or monster club that you've got going on or still on those lines.
Sean, I can't think of this guy's last name, but he has a website called Gablinko with a K, and he put out a drawing a day. October is kind of known for Inktober, which is do a drawing a day, and I think this just parallels that, but he calls it Monster Drawing Club, and you draw a monster a day and put them up. It's a way to practice. If you've never done one of those things where you have to do something for 30 days, it's the first 10 days are like easy, right? And then it gets kind of hard to like always have time set aside to do those things. But yeah, they're fun.
Yeah, that's me. If I'm like, okay, I'm going to start running every day for the next month. The first week, you're like, just like, oh, I'm killing it, and then the second week, you're like, oh, this sucks.
Right.
However, if you manage to get through it, I usually find like the last few days, you get to the end of the last few days, you're like, oh, I'm done. Oh, but I kind of want to keep going now. You get a little bit of juice of it at the end. But
I'm a big believer in that. There's I don't know. I assume it was like the Seinfeld who came up with this. You've seen the Seinfeld chain idea where like if you want to do something, you do it every day, and every day you put an X on your calendar and you just try to keep a chain, like do it as many days in a row as you can do it. And then if you fall off for a day, okay, you start a new chain, right? And that's how you get to be what you want to be. Like it's funny because a lot of times, if somebody says they're a poet or a writer or an artist, you kind of want to ask like, well, what are you writing, or what are you painting, or what are you into right now? And well, I haven't done it in a while. Okay. Like when I hear that, it's kind of a red flag for me. I'm like, I care less about whether you're good or not, and care more about whether you're practicing what it is you want to do. Because you can't really say you're that thing if you don't do it on a routine basis. You don't have to do it every day, but you got to do it, you got to do it enough to like, if you're not putting your time and energy there, then you really you're fooling yourself. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. You're doing yourself a disservice a little bit with that. I agree.
Yeah. Right. And it's the only way to get good. It's the way that it's one of those things where you can't wear it out, your creativity. It actually gets bigger the more you use it. And it atrophies the less you use it. Right.
Yeah, I went through a phase for a while where I was a big fan of going. There's a subreddit called Writing Prompts, and I would go in there probably once every couple of days or something, and just pull 3 or 4 of the popular prompts and just try to write like a small story about it. My writing is terrible; it's nothing I will ever share with anybody. But I found it really interesting to try to come up with a creative process of taking somebody else's words and doing it. I also tried at one point, there was a advice, I can't remember where I heard it, might have been from another podcast or a show or something, but they recommended going and taking your favorite books and taking like the first line from the book and then continuing on from there.
That's good.
And so I was trying that for a little bit. I've never gotten any better, really. Maybe I'm just being a harsh critic, but they're all kind of garbage in my mind. But they're fun. Like whenever if I'm stuck in a spot and I'm bored, it's a nice little creative outlet. And I haven't done that again. That's something I have not done in several years now, but it was a lot of fun at the time. I guess I've switched more and put more energy into gaming and like the podcast stuff like that as my creative outlet. But yeah.
Do you find, I find that there's a certain high that comes just from being in the creative space, right? So it doesn't matter. It almost doesn't matter what you're doing or whatever, as long as you're kind of getting into that zone. I have little things that I do, like I think I brought this up once on my podcast, the idea of opening up a pack of magic cards. I don't do that anymore. I haven't bought magic cards in ages. But if you're ever in a shop and they're drafting, you could just go by and say, can I have that? Because they're putting all their commons, they call it draft chaff, throwing all their commons to the side. If you grab a fistful of those, like, a dozen of those, and lay them out and try to make like a setting out of those, like,
I've done that.
Stories. Yeah.
I don't use the physical cards, but I've done exactly what you're describing. There's a website that you can go to, and they have every Magic the Gathering card ever made, all the art, everything's there, and you can just click on the random button, and you get random.
Oh shoot, I wanted to say Scryfall, but that's not it.
It's something like that. I'll find it and put it in the show notes for anybody who's interested.
Yep, you can do that. I do that. I do a lot of doodle drawings where I started drawing just by kind of scribbling all over the paper and like making weird angular motions and dots and things, and then just progressively working at it until something comes out. Things like that for me are kind of my Sudoku or whatever. It's therapy.
Yeah, the magic card thing is interesting. You bring it up to the chaff, because it's something I have not done yet, but it's on my list of things. Like if I'm going to go run a con game, I want to spend some time and do this. Ben Milton from Questing Beasts had a video. I think the very first video of his I ever found was him taking common magic cards and using a hole punch and then gluing them to little wooden discs to use as tokens. And I was like, that is genius. Like, it's just, I was like, how did I not ever think of that? That's brilliant. Because then you can put it inside a poker case and you can carry it around nice and easy. And I was like, that's great. So if I ever go to do con games, I think I would do something like that, is just make a bunch of those up and bring them with me, because it's super cheap to do if you're getting the commons and stuff.
Yeah, and I'm almost of the mindset. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Where so those come out almost like pogs, right? They're kind of that. I think they were 1.5 inches, and you put them on like a wooden disc, so they have just enough, or a poker chip, just enough height where you can grip them easily, and they're colorful and everything. But nobody's going to mistake that for like a miniature,
right?
And while miniatures are super cool, and I have a lot, and I paint a lot, and I like doing that, and I like the kind of environmental realism that you can get if you have a lot of them. I just find that ultimately you're never going to have enough, right, to do everything your brain can come up with. So then your brain starts working around what you have, which is
exactly
can be a trap. And also just I find that like have you ever noticed when people will be role playing and there's miniatures around? Have you ever seen somebody like grab their miniature and kind of wiggle it when they talk, as if like, this is my character speaking, right?
Going back to your childhood and using your action figures.
Yeah. Which is, I think the funny thing is there's kind of what I'm going to say is there's kind of a sweet spot. There's on one end of the spectrum, there's like all the miniatures, right? Fully painted, dwarven forged tile sets, the whole bit, right? And on the other end, there's like nothing, just some completely theater of the mind. Maybe on the other end of that, if we're going to go just like say, okay, it has to at least be physical, it's like using erasers and bottle caps and things like that. I find that there's a happy medium, like representing maybe having a couple miniatures that are really cool for like the boss or something, but around him are minions that are like bananagrams tiles, that are his goblins or whatever. Pawns from a game or what. I find that those things are sometimes better for the imagination than fully realized pieces. Because if you ever get into this trap where you set something down and you go, well, this is a kobold, but it's not really a kobold. It's like, you can look at this kobold, but now you got to imagine it with blue skin and a unicorn horn, because it's really a smeblin, whatever a smeblin is, right?
Yeah, we used to use starbursts, and you put it down, and if you killed that monster, you got to eat the starburst. So it was always great that way.
Yeah, that's good.
But having something that's a little bit abstract, like I feel that way. I love VTTs. I know people talk about virtual tabletops, they kind of poo-poo them at times. I really love them just because they offer an ability to play with folks in ways that we wouldn't be able to in other ways. But I worry about the trap. I felt the trap of the pressure of, okay, I'm trying to design these and I have to have the perfect map, but I have to have and it's draining. It's demotivating almost to go and run the game whenever you feel, oh, well, they're not going to like this map. This is just you know, it's not fancy enough, which
yeah.
Nobody cared about it when we were kids, but that most people don't care now. If you were sitting down at a table and playing with folks, for some reason, VTT brings that anxiety to me. So I don't know. I like the happy medium of being able to bring the tokens from a VTT to real life and having them on those little wooden circles. I think that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But still being able to reach over and grab my Chessex map and lay it out and use them on there and just kind of work.
I think there's an analogous like sweet spot in the virtual tabletops as there is to the death, like just like you're not going to have all the miniatures, at your table unless you're Joe Manganiello and you've got an amazing base and whatever that used to be a wine cellar or something. You're not going to have all of those. And on the virtual thing, I've only chased that monster so far. I've seen other people and I've played in games where other people have taken it all the way with the lighting effects and the fog of war and even things like weather, like snow blowing across the screen and stuff. And what I find with those is they are a distraction that while as cool as they look, unless you are extremely smooth with those as a GM, then they're a distraction. Like I had a GM friend, great GM, but like he kept trying to get, the music wasn't working very well. And and it became this like, oh, can you hear it now? Okay, well, let me try this. Or, and there's this, and I'm like, I don't care. I don't care about the music. It's not that big a deal, right? Like it's cool that you had it, but if it doesn't work the first time out, just throw it away. We'll get it right next time, and so I finally, for me, I use Owlbear Rodeo because I can prep that thing in about 10, 15 minutes, just dragging things off my desktop onto it. It lets me do the basic things I need to do. The menuing is not so complicated that I get lost in it. I want it but I do like having the visuals. I mean, I think at some point, especially most games work fine theater of the mind, and ultimately they all do. But at some point, it is kind of nice to have like relative positioning, like you're in when seconds matter, when you're at like speeded up motion combat, really is what I'm talking about. But I don't want to nail it down and say it's always combat. But it's nice to be able to kind of visualize the space better, and it's hard to describe that space in motion with things. Oh, he's over by the west wall, and to your left, and you're like, well, you're sitting in a circle. Who's left? Those kind of things get kind of tough. So even if you just have a whiteboard or something where you can just kind of very hastily scratch it out, it's a big deal. I've got one things I do that I like is I find the big fold out like Chessex maps and stuff, they're cool, but they take up so much table space, and I don't often have a big enough table. Show me some.
So everybody who's listening on audio didn't see me just stick up my finger and go, oh, well, just 1 second. But there is this product here is what I use now instead of Chessex maps. It's the equivalent. It's got a normal grid on one side and a hex on the other. It's put out by Big Pocket. I can't remember the gentleman's name that runs Big Pocket, but it's silicone. So you can bend it and you can squish it all up into a little ball.
Sham wow.
Yeah, it folds back out flat every time. You can use anything on it. You could use a Sharpie on this thing and still wipe it off, no problem. And one of his marketing things, he goes, and if your wife needs it, you can use it as a cooling pan or cooling rack for stuff.
Right, that looks pretty cool.
But yeah, this has been a huge. Like I've got the Chessex map, of course, same as everybody else does, but I find I don't ever reach for it anymore. I always reach for this silicone one. It's so much nicer, and I can draw on it, leave it drawn on, fold it up, throw it in a bag, bring it back out, roll it back out, and I may have to touch up a couple of spots of it rubbed, but for the most part, it's great.
That sounds good. That sounds like magic. I'm going to have to hunt that up.
Yeah, I'll provide a link to that one.
What I use sometimes, if one thing you got to remember, like if you're doing that, if you're getting into the battle map thing, the temptation is to like try to draw the entire level or whatever. You don't need to do that. Just draw a couple encounter spaces, right? And I have some just 8x10 sheets of paper with 1-inch grids printed on them that I've run through a laminator. I got like 7 sheets of those, and they fit they're same size as books and things, so they go in the backpack. And those are really handy. I put a grid on one side and blank on the other, so I can just draw if I just want to draw. But you can use, so it's the same kind of idea. It's nice to have something to be able to do a visual quickly. But yeah, it can go over if you expect too much out of yourself, I think, on those.
Yeah, for me with VTTs now, I try to keep it where unless you're in a combat situation, I pretty much only switch to something else other than this if I'm in a combat situation. But everything else, I'll have like a image that's like an evocative image of the theme of what you're going through. So like right now, I'm on our video conference, I'm sitting in a dungeon. I might have a picture of a dungeon up like this, and as you're crawling through the dungeon. But should an encounter happen, I'd switch us over to a very simple grid map. There wouldn't be any details on it. Maybe the walls are there and that's it, and do the combat that way. And I find that's the happy medium for me. It keeps the prep time low, and as I'm thinking of stuff to prep, the evocative images are also helping me, and hopefully setting up that letting players fill in the details in their mind of what's up.
I think every GM comes up with their own little tricks to evoke things, and I think they're all good, right? Whether it's Relia, like a map that you burned the edge, a piece of paper that you burned and turned into a letter, or a pipe that you set on the table or something like that, or whether it's images that you flash up, or like you were saying, even things like your video conferencing background, because that's not taking up any table space, which is cool. We all find ways to kind of evoke the feeling we want, and the more you're kind of conscious about that, the cooler I think it gets, without being, because they can be small touches that do a lot, right?
Yeah,
they really can. Yeah.
So one of the questions I've always said, I don't know, I'm sure the answer is probably going to be no, but and I'm sure you've probably gotten this question a bunch, but you're an artist, you've created some really great art. Everybody who's in the tabletop role-playing space that thinks of art and sees the last name Otus is going to go, are they related? So for anybody who doesn't know, is there any relation?
Yeah. No, only in an ideological sense is there a relationship. I mentioned that in my Square job, I have that I run a software company. I'm the president of a software company. So for my gaming life, I use a nom de plume, and and when I chose it, I don't think I thought that anybody would ever hear of me, so it didn't matter. The first name I was inspired by Ray Bradbury and Ray Harryhausen, and then the last name by Errol Otus, and so it's just Ray Otus. But it's not my real name, and he's not in any way
not your real dad
related to me. But yeah, I wish he were my real dad, but he's not. If my own dad's listening, I'm sorry, Dad. But I did get to play in a game with him not too long ago, and he's a really cool. He's exactly what you'd like. Super cool, very chill, but also inventive and creative GM, And he was drinking some ungodly mix of, I think it was Mountain Dew and Dr. Pepper or something, like half and half while he GM'd. I was like, holy cow.
That sounds like diabetes in a glass.
And he always looks so thin and fit. I'm like, how do you do that, man? But yeah, no, he's very cool.
I've not gotten down to any of the major cons down in the States, and it's on my list of things I must do next year. It was on my list for things to do this year, but at the beginning of the year, the travel between Canada and the US was very, very much up in the air of how things would work. So my plans kind of got dashed. Now it's all pretty close. We're back to everything being normal. Just got my passport renewed, so I'm happy that way. So yeah, my plan is to start hitting cons in 2023 in the States and take some trips down. I've kind of got North Texas RPG Con earmarked as the one I want to hit for sure. You sound like you've been to a few.
I started traveling for work in 2000. I've always been fairly close to Gen Con. Even when it was in Milwaukee, I went a couple times. But when it went to Indy, I was very close to it because I used to live in Indiana. So I was about an hour and a half away from there, and I went to quite a few of those. When I moved to California, it's about 15 years ago now. I had to travel a lot for the company, and sometimes I would end up just weekending over somewhere rather than like flying back for a day and a half and then getting back on a plane and flying. And so I started just finding. The first thing I started doing was I was at a conference in Lake Placid, and that was close enough to some friends that I had on Google Plus in Montreal that I decided. Actually, this is pre-Google Plus. That I decided I was going. It was a forum that we were on with. I decided I was going to make the drive up to Montreal, so I rented a car and drove in in Montreal, which is a trick because all the signs are in French, of course, and everything's different. But
and the roads are nuts.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I got it done. Nobody honked at me or swore at me, but I went up there and I gamed with them, and that was fun. And like, I went to Charcon, I think it is, in Charlottesville. I don't know. I would find, if I had a weekend free, I'd look around to see if there was one close by and strike while the iron's hot, and like, I would always try to go out and see local game stores that were close. Man, like the Cincinnati area, which is one I go to a lot now because one of the arms were business over there. They have quite a few really cool little game stores. There's an old one called Yada Quest that's good. There's one where a bunch of the DCC guys hang out. I think it's called East Side Games or something, but I don't know. It's fun to see people gaming in different parts of the, we do it virtually now, right? Like the game I had with Ray Otus was virtual for Gary Con. It was one of the years Gary Con was virtual. So.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to trying some of those out. There's a lot of them that are, anything that's in the Northeast is fairly accessible for me to drive to.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like North Texas, we'll fly down to and make a long weekend out of it or something like that. But I'm looking forward to going and experiencing some of those, because I've only been to in my area. There's really only like small cons, like you're seeing like 10 to 12 tables at most or something being played at, and it's one or two vendors are there. The one guy who has a 3D printer that's printed off all his stuff and is selling them, and somebody else who's got jewelry bags and stuff like that, and what have you. So I'd like to go down and see what I've seen in videos and heard other people talk about and experience that a little bit. I think that'd be really fun.
Gen Con back in the day, I'm going to sound old now, but like back when it was in Milwaukee and pre-internet, because now everything is everywhere. You know what I mean? Like all distances are meaningless. And you can buy from any retailer anywhere and get it shipped. So back in the Milwaukee days, this is, I think 96 or 97 was the first year I went to Gen Con. You'd walk through there and I'd see all kinds of stuff I'd never seen before. Things that now looking back, I was like, oh, there's so many of those things I wish I'd bought, that I didn't know what it was at the time. They just got globby miniatures. And now I realized they were like heritage miniatures from 1979 or something. But all these things you could never get elsewhere. And I spent a ton of money. I know. I remember saying to my friends, like, the less we eat, the more we can buy miniatures and whatnot. And, so I starved myself and didn't sleep and whatever. I had a great time, of course. But now, like, if you go to Gen Con, the floor is amazing. It's super cool to walk around it. You could spend a whole day walking the floor, but it's only I'd say about a third of it, maybe a third of it is stuff that you can't see everywhere. Most of it is stuff you can see anywhere. Buy anywhere, because the internet, and it lost that charm for me. There was I think I used to be big into games on demand. Then I kind of started hanging out with the DCC folks, but basically now if I go to game, I line up games and I just game the whole time, right? Like, because I can shop online anytime, but gaming is like, yeah.
No, that's a good point. It exposes you to different people too. Like I'm kind of excited to go to some of these just to try to coordinate it with other creators and people that I've spoken to or interacted with in some way online. Just be like, oh, I'd like to actually meet this person face to face and say hi and what have you. Because while we've got
kind of seal the friendship with like a physical, like Larry Hamilton. I met him at he does the Follow Me and Die. I think he still does that podcast. Yep. But and Cody Mazza I met there, and like just different Thaddeus who does the patches that you see, like different people I've met at these cons. Yeah, it's really cool to be able to put their face in your brain. When you talk to them online.
And it's just buy somebody a beer and just sit there and be present with them. I think is what would be cool.
Do this what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Just not have the screen and the everything else around, right? But
yeah,
I spent a good portion of my day every day doing this all over the world. So it's nice to be able to step away from it when you can. One thing I love about your podcast is your unabashed love of Rust monsters, which For me, I love the Rust Monster because I'm a mean, evil DM and like to take things away after I've given them. What's your favorite Rust Monster story?
Oh, okay. All right. This is actually real doable. And this is something I haven't talked much about on my podcast, maybe at all, because I took a break right about the time this happened. My birthday 2 years ago, decided, because it was like the middle of COVID, my gaming friends and I, who used to meet up at a brewery to game, hadn't been in face to face for a while. I've been doing virtual. And I said, look, if you guys are comfortable, come over to my garage. Just two of them and two of my kids. There's three of them and two of my kids. I only have two kids, so my two kids. I don't know why I said two of. that I know.
Your wife's raising an eyebrow from the other room now.
Yeah, exactly. And so I got out all the stuff, right? Like I designed like 4 levels of dungeon with tiles, including like a hellscape level. I got all the miniatures I was going to use for each one. I made pre-gens. I made like, I don't know, 18 or 20 pre-gens and let them pick from them as they got there. I would match. I had figures sitting on index cards with stats on them, and I called it Dungeon Run 1. And I've actually got it. I got a booklet that has the whole adventure in it, including the layouts and everything. And we had a blast. It was a deal where the king's beloved, what did I call the dog? His dog had been taken by his vizier. His vizier had taken his dog and he didn't know why. Turned out he was going to use the dog in a ritual, but at any rate, so they're trying to get the dog back. And and while he's talking to him, he's holding a cat and he's stroking the cat. And the cat, he's talking about how the dog and the cat were best friends and how the cat really misses him, but the cat's like, it's got one ear that's burned, and like the whole thing turns out that it's fairly obvious that the dog is a hellhound or something like that, right? So, but at any rate, they're on the first level of this dungeon, and there's a middle hallway in this dungeon, and in this colonnaded middle hallway, there's a rust monster at the far end. So they come in, and this thing comes bounding at them, and I think of them like, they look like they have like cricket legs almost to me. They have those big back feet, like kangaroo feet. So I see them kind of leaping forward in big bounds at you. And so they had been in the wizard's study right before that, and they had found these weird chunks of metal, and they didn't know what they were for, but they had taken them. Right. So they get it, and they start throwing the chunks of metal like over in the corner, and the rust monster would scurry over there because that's his treats. He's been fed those before. He knows, like, don't, like, it keeps them away from their armor. Well, later on, every time they go through this hallway, they've got to do that, and they pretty quickly run out of these chunks of iron. And they're in a little side chamber where there's a little prison area. Don't get into it too much, but at any rate, they and there's another room that they had been in that had all these chains hanging from the ceiling, and they'd pulled one of them, and it was a trap. And so, like, now that, and there's a locked thing in the center of the floor, an iron grill, and they had to get down. And they know one of the chains will probably do it, but they're afraid to pull the others, right? So eventually they come on this idea that they take the dwarf who's got all the armor on, and they send him out as bait, and he runs around and gets the rust monster running after him. And then he runs through this room and locks the rust monster in. So then, like, they hear all these noises and all these crazy, like explosions and water gurgling and all this kind of stuff. And so they eventually go back into the room, and there's this rust monster, poor rust monster, like lying on the ground, like completely wiped, like fatigue, half drowned, and there's all kinds of scorch marks on the walls and different, because it had set off every trap there was, trying to eat these chains, and the door going down is open. So that's probably my favorite rust monster story, just because they ended up using the monster as a key, and it was really fun.
That's an ingenious way of using them, actually. And I like because the way you describe the rust monster almost just makes it sound like a little happy puppy. Like it's not really, it's not out to hurt anybody. It just wants its food. One
of the things I loved about Dungeon World, actually maybe the thing I like most about it, was the way monsters are designed. So monsters have, and this is something you could really do with anything, but it kind of ties into the mechanics of the game. So I won't get into that, but monsters have a thing that they have an instinct, right? And then they have moves. They have a couple moves, and the moves are just things that they do. They're like tactics, right? And it was a very easy way to sketch out like the personality of a monster. And I think it's important to have like your monster is like, okay, what is it doing? What does it want? What's its order of operations to get what it wants? It doesn't have to be super detailed, but like in Dungeon World, what happens is whenever somebody's rolling and they fail, you don't get a turn as a GM generally until somebody fails. And when they fail, basically, then you get to make your move. And so that's like the monsters. You got this list of moves, and you look down and like, if it's an amoeba-like monster, it might say like, encompass them, like, suck them into the middle of your being or whatever that move is. And so like when somebody fails their move, the goop, runs up their sword arm and just like, and now they're inside of it. And that's the move. Well, I like those kind of things. And I like thinking about like the visuals of what the monster is going to do in my best moments, right? Like you breathe life into things like that. I don't always do it. There's a lot of times you forget to do it. And an encounter just becomes like, oh, there's 6 of these guys. Tell me when you're done beating the hell out of them,
Yeah. I swing my sword. I swing my sword again.
I know, right? You got to, yeah. It's all those little things that, like, if you just take a little time to think about the field, like to make the rooms more interesting, to put enough dressing there for people to, put a chandelier there so they can swing off of it. Put some draperies, a carpet with a trapdoor under it, a table they can stand on, whatever. It's like little things like that, and just and a ways to sort of that the monster, like the rest monster just wants it just wants some metal, right?
Yeah.
So you can, like, if you can come up with a way to feed it metal that isn't your armor, you're golden.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily going to eat you. So
I've been going through this month with the basic accessory series of books, and recently I did AC7, and in that one part of the adventure that's in AC7, there's a scene where the characters are going through they're climbing a spire up to the top of this mountain, and they go through a section where there are, I think it's orcs or something. It's some monster, hobgoblins. Sorry, it's hobgoblins. And these hobgoblins come out and they attack the party, but they're not trying to attack them to kill them. They're trying to attack them and remove all their armor and weapons, and they're throwing them down into a pit of rust monsters, but you can't see the rust monsters at the bottom. Yeah. So if anybody jumps in to go get their stuff, there's like 7 or 8 rust monsters down there. Yeah. And I was like, that is so evil, but it's also pretty clever of like, rather than trying to
it makes me think two of the things that I wrote, to go full circle back to the zines. There's 2 of the zines that I wrote. One was called Kazarak, and it's an abandoned city of where the dwarves did something. The book is kind of vague about it, but something happened and they all fled and they haven't been back, So like adventurers go back to the city, I could think about the power vacuum, right? So when dwarves move out, what's left? Well, one thing that's left is a crap ton of metal. So of course you're going to get an infestation of rust monsters. You're going to get Zorn. You're going to get like, some different things that would have moved in, and almost like fleas or cockroaches would, right? And the same thing I did in the Horde, where I talk about dragons. It's my take on dragons, which is, I was watching those shows about hoarding. You get into like different shows, and I only want to watch like 4 or 5 of them, then I move on to something else, right? Although Forged in Fire, somehow I'd keep watching even.
You too.
Right?
Okay.
That's
one of the few
even though it's
reality
the same
TV
every
shows that I
time.
watch. Yeah, it's the exact same show, but I can't stop watching. What's your
fun of
opinion on the new
people make
host?
stuff.
Sorry, this is everybody else.
I know, right?
Just tune down for a second.
I'm used to him now. Yeah,
but
I
at the
didn't
beginning
like
it was rough, wasn't it? Like you're like, who is this guy?
Yeah. He's not as good as the old guy. He's no Will Willis. No. But so what's his name? Grady, I think, the new guy. At any rate,
Grady or something like that.
Yeah. Oh shoot, I lost my.
Sorry, I threw you. Right
so
off.
hoarding. No. I'm just thinking about like dragons. Like they're just like any of us. We want all the dice. We want all the miniatures. We want all the value, like the relative value of these things maybe doesn't matter that much. You get obsessed with like, sorting them by color and, like knowing what you want to know about each of the collecting variant covers or whatever it is, signatures. You get obsessed with the kind of collecting and organizing, and then it quickly overwhelms you, right? Of having stuff. That's the curse it's the blessing and curse of stuff. And I got to think about dragons just like hoarders like that they just, you never know when you might need that thing. So it's not all like them amassing a pile of gold and laying on it. They might have whole hallways filled with like broken wagon wheels, sorted by size and levels of brokenness or something. They might have endless, like it's just clothing, vintage clothing full of killer moths or something. So then you start thinking about the different places in their hoard and different types of hoards. Like I did one with a sea monster that was full of that had basically just amassed shipwrecks, right? Like a Sargasso Sea of like making a big flotilla of shipwrecks. So you start thinking about the kind of things that be in there. And one of the things that I designed for the zine was these things called what did I call them? They look like horseshoe crabs kind of, but they're dragon ticks is what they are. They're dragon fleas, basically, but they're big, kind of football sized bugs that are blood drinkers. They're like reskin sturges kind of. And they crawl all around the hoard, but one of the good things about them is if you can catch them, sometimes they're full of dragon blood, and dragon blood has,
right.
properties, right? But, you just start thinking about, I like that kind of environmental, like what makes an environment special. And that's one of the things that you don't get if you just pick up for the most part, like if you just go to the store and pick up a pre-made module for D&D, they're kind of full of the same old ideas over and over and over. I feel like for the most part, there are exceptions, but
yeah, it is difficult to find really new things now, I think, because there's so much, like, there's so much that's come out that even unless you get into a super detailed niche thing like that, it's the high level stuff's all been done. But I heard with one last Rust Monster story. It was ages ago. Runehammer was talking about a game. I think it was Runehammer. He was talking about a game that he had ran, and he had a forest full of elves that used all wooden weapons and everything, but they kept rust monsters as guard dogs, essentially.
Perfect, right?
Yeah, because it was like the rust monsters aren't going to bother the elves. They don't have any metal. But
you build your culture on wood and leather and stuff like that, and then
I was like that's genius. I love that.
Genius.
But
how do they farm metal to feed them? Like, what do they feed them? But
that's true. I guess they're really hoping adventurers come through all the time.
Pay the toll. I don't know. Dragon crabs is what they were called, by the way. And there's a really cool Wana Ochoa illustration of them. So, by the way, all these zines are free. If you go to my rayotus.itch.io page, you can get the whole collection in one bundle, free bundle. Print them yourself if you want. They're there in both like screen form and booklet form, so that you can print them up as a booklet already ordered. But it's on page 8 of the hoard. I've got this cool. It's almost like an anatomical drawing. There's like the nose and the wings, and then there's like its bladder full of blood and stuff. But yeah, it's some of the stuff's really cool. I forget about it because it's been so long since I did this. Let's see if they have the date on this. Like it's not even mine. But I spent so much time on these. Let's see, 2017. So it wasn't that long ago. 2017.
So what do you find that you're playing most often now?
Most often I'm playing old school Essentials. I don't know if it's my favorite game, but it's
the one you get people for.
Well, we have kind of my group and I did kind of during COVID, we started a campaign in that. It was right when it came out. In fact, the books, I had been in the Kickstarter and had the PDFs, but not the books yet. I actually had the BX Essentials, the precursors in physical form. But I said, let's try this. It's just BX. Let's have some fun. And so a few of us got together every Sunday afternoon and played, and I called it my Agartha campaign. So it's a city built on top of an ancient dwarven like citadel, and they basically bastardized all the stones in what used to be the dwarven stones and reused them in the city. So there's runes. It's called City of Runes, and there's like dwarven runes worked into a lot of this cityscape, but they're not respected at all. They're like turned upside down or used out of context, and so like it's a really sore point for any dwarves that come through. That the humans have repurposed all this old stonework, and so I made this kind of little setting, and then this is something a habit I picked up really from Dungeon World. Not everybody likes this, but my group really does. Especially at the beginning of the game, I'd ask them a few questions like, we'd invent some guilds, or usually I'd ask them some leading questions, and we basically collaboratively made some of not so much the on-screen stuff, not the stuff that affected like that night's session, but some like background of the world. So like whoever played the elf, I'd let him answer some questions about what elves are like in this world, and et cetera. Like one of the things we made up was that dwarven history is inscribed on hexagonal columns, and so their repository of ancient lore is buried way down at the bottom of this lost citadel in a hallway of columns, and you have to know, the only way to know how to navigate it is by like finding books of previous scholars who've wandered through here and like read so like you come up with these like clever ideas that make your world unique. And so that's why we still play in that world, is because we rotate GMs. We've all been different characters in that world. We've all run things in that world. It's kind of our shared, and so we like it for that reason. And that's what we play most. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really want to focus, I think maybe next month, the focus of the podcast is going to be more on worlds and settings. And I may actually do the Gaiac 75 challenge during that month, next month.
Mm-hmm.
I've been thinking a lot lately that there hasn't been any, and I am under no illusions that I would be the one to go to do this, but I feel like there hasn't been any large world scale settings. Like there's been smaller settings, like maybe like Midgard, like something the size of like the UK or something, but there hasn't been any world size settings really done well that I know of really in the last like 15, 20 years.
I agree. It sort of died out in the 90s, right? And I don't know if I don't know the why, whether it died out for a good reason or if it's just something that people lost sight of. Because you think about Mystara or Greyhawk, or even there's a joke about the Forgotten Realms. You see the meme and it shows like the Sword Coast, and they put a circle around it that says Remembered Realms, and then all the others are Forgotten Realms, because like
nothing ever happens.
Exactly. Nothing ever happens outside this. Yeah. But yeah, there's not a lot of really, you're right. There's not a lot of really detailed, like big world kind of settings. I feel like maybe Astonishing Swords and Sorcerers did that a little bit.
Yeah. And I think if depending on how far back, if you want to say like since 2000, I think you'd have like Pathfinder's setting would qualify as a full scale world.
Yeah. I don't know much about it, but I just felt like it's kind of like just a reaction to trying to carve in their own territory after Wizards kind of stabbed them in the back.
Yeah, it's basically their version of Forgotten Realms, where they can have everything in there all at once.
I like how I threw that slanted language out and you didn't bite on it. I was trying to bait you there, but
no. I am wise in the ways of the internet. Baits roll right off. But unless you're Joe for whatever reason seems to be able to throw. If Joe from Hindsightless can throw out the littlest word, and I'm like, I got to respond to this now, and then another type happens, and we all argue.
Joe's a little bit like my older brother. He knows exactly where to stick the needle. You know what I mean? Like sometimes he'll say something and you'll be like, I know he's just joking, but I can't not say something in response to that. Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, I would love to see, I mentioned with Chris Gonnerman recently that the way that he has the basic fantasy RPG project, I would love to see if somebody was willing to run a project of that scale, but do something like Harn, right? So like, let's make an open source Harn world. But yeah,
most of the stuff now is more like the biggest kind of scale you get is something like Dolmen Wood, or you know what I mean? They're more like the size of Ireland kind of settings.
Exactly.
At most. Yeah.
Which I guess in some ways is good, because it leaves the GM, it gives the GM a starting point, and the GM can expand past that. But I think there is something special about there being a shared world that multiple GMs run and kind of have something going on with it. But
well, I think the common experience is something that, like, that was one good thing about the age of modules, right? Is that you could go to a con and you guys could, people could compare stories. Like if you've both been through Expedition of the Barrier Peaks, you could say like, oh, we did this. Oh, we didn't run into that. Was that in the module, you think, or did GM make that up? And like, this happened to us. Oh yeah. We got past that, like it's this shared, it's like you sort of watched the same TV show, but you didn't.
Yeah, exactly. And currently, like now when you have those discussions with people, everybody's talking about this unique TV show that they encountered, but you'll never be able to go through it the same as well. So yeah, it's a different style there. So you have your own podcast. So I don't know.
Yeah, when I remember to turn the mic on, I do. I'm not super consistent, but yeah.
Hey, I went and disappeared for the better part of a year at one point, so I know all about that. but so you've got your own platform to throw out anything that you want, but I want to pose it out to you the same way I do with everybody on here. What's something that you wish somebody would ask you about so you would have the opportunity to go talk about it? What's something that you wouldn't bring up on your own, but if somebody asked you, you'd love to wax on about it a little bit?
I should have been ready for this question because I know you asked this question.
It's better. The awkward pause I like.
Yeah, I don't know. This is a hard topic. I'm going to say this. Depression, right?
Okay.
I think a lot of gamers suffer from it, especially creative types. It kind of comes hand in glove, I think, a little bit. It started hitting me hard around 50. And it's mostly a chemical thing. And I recognize it as that, meaning it's not like, it doesn't matter whether I had a bad day or a good day or people think it's related to what's happening. It's not. Sometimes you just wake up in the dumps and then like, there's not much you can do. You can take a walk, you can get exercise and eat right and all that kind of stuff if you're good to do that. But it's like, there's things that help, but it's not always, and I feel like there's an intersection with gaming. I don't know that it's not that gaming causes it, or it's maybe that people who suffer from these kind of things are creative types and find themselves in gaming a lot, or it's a curative for gaming, depression. There's also this kind of, this is a very hazy, so I wish somebody would talk about it. Which something we should all talk about more, I guess. But there's also the feelings of there's a little bit of like materialism in gaming, where there's in real life, I always say, like, you got to stay away from that mentality that the next thing you buy is the thing that's going to make you happy. And in gaming, there's that kind of mentality too. We go in cycles. Everybody has the nights where they don't feel like gaming. And we game on Monday nights, my group right now. And let me tell you, it is hard. Every Monday afternoon, I'm like, I hope somebody calls and like we cancel. And we almost never do. And I know, like, I'm not going to be the guy to do it. You know what I mean? And I get myself to the table and then I have a good time. And the getting to the table actually is the mood altering. Like, that's the thing that I don't know if it just takes my mind off of stuff or if it gives me the social thing I need or whatever. I think there's a lot to unpack there. That's all I'm saying. And so the answer to the question is like the intersection between depression and gaming, like moods and gaming.
Yeah, I think mental
that's what Duncan Idaho says, right? To re-paraphrase or to rewrite his thing is like, moods aren't a thing for what's he say? Fighting and what's he say? Basically, Paul Atreides says, "I'm not in the mood to like train," right? And Duncan says, "Mood's a thing for lovers, not fighting," or something like that. So I just say, mood's a thing for lovers, not gaming. I don't know.
Yeah, I think a mental health discussion is completely valid to have there, because I know it's actually something I want to bring up in a future interview that I'm doing with Dan Proctor, because I know he's mentioned that he had a lot of stresses and anxieties happening at a period of time, and that's kind of why Labyrinth Lord went to the side for a while for him, and he's just now coming back out of it. So I would definitely want to have that discussion with him, but I think it would be something good to have overall with people, because it's something that people feel awkward to talk about, and it's something I think everybody deals with in some way. I know when I've gone through those phases, the thing that kind of makes me not want to speak about it is that I go and I think, I'm like, well, people who know me would look at me and go, "Man, your life's doing all right. Why do you have any room to complain?" Right. Yeah. And so you almost feel bad about having your own issues because you're not having something as bad as the person you perceive.
I feel embarrassed. I feel broken. I'll tell you something I don't tell many people. So, you probably know, since you listen to my podcast, there was a couple years ago, I had an accident, was farting around on an electric scooter going about 20 mile an hour and ended up ass over tea kettle and broke both my elbows. Literally, like, I shattered the bone and dislocated both elbows. It was nasty. I'm laying on the ground afterwards. This guy comes up to me and he's like, "Dude, are you okay?" And I'm like, "I don't know." I said, "Give me a minute. Like, it's hurt so bad right now." It's like when you bite your tongue and there's just waves of pain coming and I can barely talk. And I'm like, "Give me a minute. Like, I'll see if I can set up." And he goes, "Can you move your arms?" And I go, and I start thinking about it. I'm trying to like direct my brain because my head's like actually lower than my feet. I'm laying with my head in the street, my feet up on the sidewalk, and I'm like, I don't think I can. And he goes, they look kind of funny. And he reads this, this whole, I had him take the phone out of my pocket and call my boss to like bring her car around. Cause I was only a couple blocks from work. And I was thinking maybe I could get in her car because she has a convertible. I'm thinking maybe I can get in the car and she can take me to the hospital. So I have to call an ambulance. We had to call an ambulance. And my wife meets me at the hospital. Right. And the doctor asked me what medications I was on. And that's when I had to tell my wife that I was on, I take fluoxetine, which is generic for Prozac. I take a fairly small dose of it, a daily dose, but I didn't want to tell her before because I felt like I didn't want her to think like, oh, it's his meds or, oh, he's, you know what I mean? I didn't want people thinking about my problems or judging me by my problems or even just feeling like I was somehow less than what she'd expect me to be. And so I had to say like, okay, I'm going to tell you something, like, like I have to tell you now, it's like I started about a year ago and I felt I knew that day was coming and I knew it was going to be horrible. Like she was a really good sport about it, but I'm like, you can understand. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to talk about that stuff. And I'm a guy that doesn't have much, like, I pretty much don't have a lot of barriers. I can talk about just about anything with people. And even that was hard for me. So I can't imagine what it's like for somebody who's super private or already has like heavy feelings of insecurity or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that, you have some people eye roll it a little bit. So here in Canada, Bell, our one of our major telecom companies through here in Canada, has this campaign that happens, I think it's once or twice a year, called Bell Let's Talk, and it's all about promoting mental health, what have you. And it's become so ubiquitous in different areas that you kind of have people start to eye roll it a little bit. But it is really something that, unless it becomes normalized, where people can do it, and not in a oh pity me standpoint, just more of like, hey, this is my reality at the moment of what's going on. Just so
my reality is a good way to say it, because it's not something I want to be like. I don't want to be ashamed of it, but I also don't want to treat it as like a badge. I don't want to be proud of it. You know what I mean? Like I want it just to be where it is. Like it is a factor in my life, and sometimes I feel it more than others. And you just have to learn how to cope with it. Use coping mechanisms, and sharing coping mechanisms is a big deal. Like what do you do? Like things that those all help. And talking about it with your family helps, of course. Knowing when to like withdraw and just say like, hey, I just need some time. I'm just gonna I do things now. It's funny because when I first realized I was depressed, I was walking every day, like routinely, doing exercise, and I'm not always good at that because I'm not a pattern person, as I mentioned before. Cyclical, right? And my wife said, oh, you must feel really good, like, because you've been doing this for so long now. And like, and I realized that like, no matter how hard I walked or how long I walked or whatever, I never ever felt good. I felt intellectually proud of the fact that I was doing the exercise, but physically I never felt good, like ever. Like I never got a high from it, or never got like, and I was like, okay, something's broken here. Like something's not right, And so that was what triggered it for me. So just saying that, I think maybe helps. Like maybe there's somebody out there who's feeling the same thing, to kind of recognize that it can be completely chemical and can it just hit you. You might have been perfectly fine. I had perfect vision up until I was 40. I would say my kids broke my vision because they'd run up and shove things in my face and say, hey, look at this, Dad, and all of a sudden your eyes go out of focus. But really, I mean, there's just a time in your life when your body changes. And now I wear glasses all the time. Okay. And that affects everything. It's so weird how little things, like it took me a long time to become an avid reader again after I got glasses, because I couldn't read. I used to read on the floor, like turned sideways or in bed or whatever. And when you wear glasses, you can't, and I can't wear contacts. Got their own kind of problem for contacts and all that stuff. It's just talking about it's kind of good if we think about it as like life hacks and like ways to kind of make our lives better. In spite of not, you're not going to get rid of the problem. I can't fix my eyes. It's not something that I can get LASIK for or whatever. So, so what do I do? Like we trade tricks and we all get stronger that way.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned it because I actually went through the almost exact opposite of that. So from a very young age, I had to wear glasses, and I wore them up until I was near 30. And then I went and had LASIK done. And then even after LASIK, I still, because and I was an avid reader growing up, but now I'm so in the habit of I can't read a book laying down on my side, or if I do read a book on my side, I have to I can read one page and then I got to roll over to my other side to read the other page because it's this weird thing of how I'm looking at the book. I don't know. It's strange, but
I was one of those kids that always had a paperback, and I'd be like I'd be sitting in a chair, quote unquote, with like my feet up where the head should be and my head down where the feet should be, and like my book hanging upside down, and and I had to all of a sudden treat it like I was a medieval scribe. I had to get to a table with a bright light and set the book. It's different. It's just whatever pattern you're in, and now you got to change all your patterns, right? And the disruption can be tough, and it's something we all have to deal with. Sharing stories with people who've had the same disruptions in their life is a good thing.
Yeah,
Joe has made me more conscious of accessibility. So when I reviewed Gozer recently, and this is how things happen. This is a good example. So James West did this incredible book, Gozer. He kickstarted it, GOZR, kickstarted it a while back. Super visual, it's all hand lettered. I talked to him. I thought he had made a font that looked like he had hand lettered the whole thing like over and over and over until he got what he wanted. And but it's a really cool book, really cool game. But I made the comment when I was reviewing it, is like, okay, this book isn't going to be very accessible. Like as a PDF, because all the text is like handcrafted and like shoved in various places. And I thought this could be a problem. I wonder, and I said at the time, I wonder if he's made a plain text document. So I said that kind of thinking about Joe, because I know Joe needs a reader, and his podcast is called Hindsightless, for crying out loud. And I think he used to go by the handle The Blind Rat on our Discord, which was funny. I like that he's very upfront, about that. And seeing challenges. And so when I said that, somebody else was it you, or was it somebody brought up that book and said, oh, and he has a plain text document. So I noticed Ben Milton talked about the book too. And then I contacted James and I said, hey, did you know that I talked about your book? And and he goes, yeah. And he goes, after I heard your review, I had a text file that I meant to finish and hadn't finished yet. So maybe get off my ass and finish it. So now he's got the plain text file out there. But because we all talk about things like that, right? It all, which I mean, major kudos for him to even thinking about it to begin with, and then for hurrying up and finishing it up, so it's out there for people. But not everybody does that kind of stuff,
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah.
It's trying to, and the only way that you can discover that sort of stuff is by having conversations and being open about, hey, this is what I have to do in order to do the same thing you do. Whether that's, I need to have a screen reader so I can see the text that you can see easily, or I need to go for a walk beforehand just to clear my head so that I'm not full of anxiety before I sit down at the table. Just, having those sorts of conversations so people are aware that, oh, you're not the only one that has to do this. I do something similar, and we all kind of learn from it a little bit.
And the way we approach each other is really important too. I didn't go, I suppose this is nice, but it's not very accessible. I didn't. No,
it's like, hey,
I just said hey, I wonder if he's thought of that.
Exactly.
And the more we're just matter of fact about it and help each other and not put each other on the defensive, right? The better it all gets.
It's less of a you horrible person for not having thought of this, because not every person is going to think of everything, but instead going, hey, in case you're not aware, some people that might really like your stuff are having a hard time with it, and try it this way. I think, when you phrase things in a way that doesn't put somebody on the defensive, like you're saying, you get more bees with honey, right? Or flies with honey.
Yeah,
that phrase.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we all know this, but we're just not always good at it. Tone. Mm-hmm. And reading, but I heard somebody say something expect the best out of people. You might get an email and you read it and you think oh, this piece of crap, I can't believe he said that. And then I was like, okay, but turn it around and read it in the best tone you can imagine. Now just pretend he actually wrote it that way, because maybe he did. Just because you were in a bad mood when you got it doesn't necessarily mean he was in a bad mood when he wrote it. He might have just been in a hurry and
that actually brings me to a thing I was going to ask you about that I completely forgot I was going to ask you. So what you said is exactly true, and I think it's a huge part of the issue on a place like, say, Twitter, where you're already limited on how much text you can use, so there isn't a whole lot of room for context, and you get people misjudging tones, and then there's all the other issues with social media. But I noticed when I was looking at stuff about you use a product that I've investigated a few times because it's kind of in my space of knowledge as well from my career. But you use Mastodon. Which is kind of like a Fediverse open source Twitter. For those who don't know, it's an alternative to Twitter. It's open standard, kind of like email. So you can have multiple servers, and everybody can have their own quote unquote Twitter website that they can go to. What was the turn on for you of Mastodon? And I unlike me, you actually still actively use it in some sense, because I saw you make a few posts recently.
Yes, I do. So I won't use Facebook. You can do what you like. I don't judge other people for using it, but it's, for me, as much as I would like to be on there connecting with everybody who's on there, the fundamental problems that are caused by the ownership of Facebook and the negative force that it has been. I know it's also a positive force. We'll get into all that, but I'm just saying, like, for me, I want it out. It also, doom scrolling and the whole bit, right? Like, it can affect your mood. It just wasn't good for me. So I got out once for about a year and a half, and then once again forever, right? Like, I think I've been out for like maybe 3 years or something now, not in it. And every once in a while, I feel the need, right? I want to connect. And so I was using MeWe for a while. When Google Plus died, a lot of us were looking for something else. And there were quite a few. I was part of the Gauntlet community at the time, and all the respect to those guys and everything. So this is going to sound maybe like a criticism, but I think it's just an example of what happened. I think a lot of groups did this. They were trying to decide where to reconvene, since Google Plus wasn't going to be it anymore. And Jason, the guy who was kind of the charismatic, like head of that group, decided it was going to be on I think he went to Slack, or it was basically a privatized like space, forum kind of idea. It wasn't really a forum, but and I went there for a little while, but I was like, we should all, like, it'd be much better if we all went to something that wasn't owned by any one of us, because that gets very insular. Like Discord now is all these little communities, and they're cool, but they're all separate communities. Are not really open, and it's hard to, like, I've got different ones with different friends, and I sort of want them to overlap, but I realize that maybe those friends don't want to be friends with each other, and this all the kind of so in the dearth of, or in the aftermath of Google Plus, we all look for things. I tried MeWe, heard all kinds of stories about how it was full of like Nazi, anti-trans, like horrible people. Never experienced that, never ran into any of them, never never even had, not near as much as on Facebook, by the way. But I was on there for a while, just recently deleted that because I had an anxiety attack and like felt like I needed to close my world down again. You know what I mean? This is part of my mental health thing. But I'm on Mastodon partially because Judd Carlman, who used to be Sons of Cryos and now does, I want to say Daydreaming About Dragons, but is it that, or is it? Yeah, it is Daydreaming About Dragons. He does that podcast, and the guy who does Halberds and Helmets, Alex Schroeder, I think it is. He does. He doesn't do his podcast much, but I really like listening to his podcast. It's very like common sense approach to his own version of BX. Those two guys were on there, so I thought I'll get on there and connect. And yeah, it's I don't know. They all have their strengths, right? Nothing's perfect, sadly.
Yeah, nothing's perfect. I mean, Google Plus wasn't perfect either in a day, but it wasn't. It hit at the right time, and it was the right spot. And
I think it mattered a lot to gamers and hardly at all to anybody else.
Yeah,
there were certain groups that just thrived on there.
There were certain, like I know there was a few photography groups that I was friends with in there as well that were really big into it. And yeah, it's sad that that's gone. That was kind of one of the things that I've, as we're going through OSR October and stuff, and the never ending question of what is the OSR comes up.
Yeah,
I'm leaning now more towards the idea of having it gone through the phases, and the phases being where people convene, and us being in a current situation where there isn't much of a commons place to convene, and there isn't that same same, community aspect of it. Like, as I've been talking to people, like as I talked to Matt Finch and Chris Gonnerman and some of the folks from the Save or Die podcast, the common thread I'm hearing from all of them is, at one point we knew everybody in the community because it was so small.
Yeah, that's right.
And now we don't know hardly anybody
much.
because it's so big and it's so spread out. And I think the growth and everything is great, but at the same time, it's a double-edged sword in the fact that it's fractured there being any sort of a common view of things, because there isn't a place where everybody has those discussions all in one spot.
Yeah, there's always every time you have a defined point of entry, you also have a defined point where you can keep people out, right?
True.
It's the sort of the rhetoric of groups that just work that way. So in some ways this is good, but in some ways it's way less coherent, right? I mean, the OSR, in the end, what is the OSR? It's a community. There's a community of people that are kind of that at the core, the thing that we have mostly in common are these old rule sets, specifically D&D, but depending on who you ask, whether it's like, always D&D or not, certainly anything that has the OGL on it, I think, is probably in that vein. And yeah, so it's kind of bad and it's kind of good. I don't know. I try not to worry about stuff like that. Things come and go. I do worry that when we lose, so like when you think about technologies that replace other technologies, the worst thing that happens is when you get like there were blogs, and blogs were kind of the place where OSR first bloomed. And I would say that I actually kind of got in probably second wave. Like, I really talked to people on Google Plus, and I wasn't much of a blog writer or reader at the time. I was blogging about old time radio at the time, vintage radio drama. But the Google Plus kind of killed blogs, but then Google Plus died. And in dying, it did a huge disservice because it killed off this one media by replacing it, but then left a vacuum, and blogs are still recovering. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
we're still trying to figure out how to get back there.
Yeah, we no longer have the the big huge blog train, like the links on the side where everybody's got everybody's other blog all linked up in those small communities. It is I've
tried InnoReader and Feedly, which are two different ways of aggregating blogs so you can see what comes out. And that's kind of good. It'd be nice if we had a more open source version of those. They're both things that you have to subscribe to get away from the ads and stuff. And
yeah, there's a few different open source projects that basically try to replicate Google Reader from back in the day. Another project that Google had that was amazing that they then closed. But yeah,
evil bastards.
I think maybe that will be where we kind of wrap things up, is that people should feel more free to talk about the uncomfortable stuff that they're going through, and try to find more ways to get themselves into a common spot to talk. I think is and whether that's on forums or on Discords or something, but trying to get more conversations together.
Sure.
I think if
we're going to put a bow on that, I'll say gaming is people, right? Like, it's not like Silent Green is people, but gaming isn't just a collection of rule systems and miniatures or whatnot. It's an activity that we all do together, and find ways to connect. It's amazingly easy, right? I mean, I grew up at a time when finding other gamers was kind of like, it was hard. I won't use any analogies, but there's all kinds of lifestyle analogies that you could get into. Like, we're trying to identify to somebody else that you're a gamer without telling them you're a gamer, so you can find out if they're a gamer. It used to be different, and now it's so easy to meet creators and get in touch with other gamers and game with people on the other side of the globe, and just it's so freeing. But we all need each other, right? Hang together.
I agree. Where can everybody go and find all your stuff, like the zines and the podcast and everything? Where should they go to find all your things?
Well, good luck. I forget to some things are kind of in hiding right now. I think you can still get Goblin Town, my game, on my old blog. But anyway, so if you go to rayotus.com, all my links are there. That will take you to 90% of what I got out there. Most of it is on all my sort of things that you can download, or on itch.io, game wise. And then my podcasts you can get anywhere where there's a podcatcher. And that's the bulk of it. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and everybody should go listen to Plundergrounds. It's great. And yeah, thank you very, very much for coming on. I appreciate it. It was fun talking with you. And
Yeah.
hopefully everybody who listened to that got the same giggles and maybe some perspectives that they didn't have before. And the whole hope they learn.
I don't think I could compare to your last couple guests. I just want to say, like, Matt Finch was amazing, and I'm not gonna be able to think of his name. Who was the guy before that? Oh, Nick Hewitt. I really enjoyed that one. So thanks for bringing those people to the table to talk, because there's some really amazing insights and just perspectives there. And it's so much fun to hear.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed doing the interviews recently. I think that's going to be as the podcast moves forward. I think that will be something that becomes a mainstay. It's both really interesting for me because I get to meet and chat with cool people instead of just me talking to myself. And it's also honestly from a creating the podcast side of things, it's way easier from a time perspective. There is some editing and stuff to do. But
all right, folks, what's that?
Yeah, exactly. All right, folks, I'm going to send this to future me, where we'll close everything out. But thank you very much for coming on the show, and everybody go check out Ray and all of his amazing little projects.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that wraps up this episode of the Redcaps Podcast. I hope you enjoyed, you learned something, and that you were eager to come back for more. Thank you for sticking through to the end. This was a long episode, but I hope everybody got a lot of cool information and enjoyment out of that episode. Reminder that there is only a couple of days left. Today, as we're recording this, it'll be coming out on Thursday, so you only have today and tomorrow to get your entries in for the Child Hero Contest. Visit the description of the podcast here. You'll get the links to all the things. And yeah, enter. You can win some really cool prizes. There's been some cool entries. So, get yours into the list and we'll play them on the air. It'll be fantastic. All right. If you want to get a hold of me, www.theredcaps.net has all the links to all the ways to reach me. And I would love to hear from you. There's email, there's SpeakPipe, there's a phone number, there's Discord, carrier pigeons, smoke signals, send a raven if you have to. Just get in touch. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, never let your caps dry out. Stay safe. Have fun. We'll talk again soon.